The third and final ballot issue to be covered is issue 53, Children's Services Proposed Tax Levy Renewal, Hamilton County. This proposed 5-year levy is a renewal of the Children's Services Levy, a property tax levy of 2.77 mills passed in November 2011. The Children's Services Levy was approved for a flat millage amount. If approved, the owner of a $100,000 home would pay about $50 per year, about the same as currently being paid. Millage has not increased since 1996. The Board of Hamilton County Commissioners placed the levy on the ballot following a review by the Tax Levy Review Committee. A majority yes vote is necessary for passage. We welcome Maura Ware to speak in favor of this issue. Ms. Ware has been Director of Hamilton County Job and Family Services since 2007. She began as a Children's Services line worker when she joined the agency in 1993. Her vision is for Hamilton County Job and Family Services to be the center of a collaborative effort that draws together and leads social service agencies, businesses, governments, families, and other community stakeholders in tackling the community's toughest social problems. You have 10 minutes to speak on this issue, Ms. Ware.
Thank you for having me. We're going to go quickly through a slide presentation. All the services that we provide are actually mandated by the federal law. So in the state of Ohio, there are 88 counties, and we administer those locally, and Hamilton County administers those federal and state rules as it relates to child welfare. Our main focus is safety, permanency, and well-being, and those are really written in the federal codes that fall down to the Ohio Revised Code. Just some things about what we do. Many of you probably are familiar with our 241 Kids line. So we receive calls from folks throughout the community about concerns about children, whether they're abused, neglected, potentially dependent. Our goal is really to work with families and provide services in the home. There are those times when we deem a child is still not safe with the services that we have readily available, so we will temporarily have to remove that child, but really our first focus is to keep children in the home. When we have to remove a child, we put them temporarily in foster care and then continue to work with families so that we can return the children back and that we know that they'll be safe when we return them. Sadly, there are some times where we're not able to do that, so then we have to look for another permanent solution for the child, which would mean that we would be looking for permanent commitment, meaning the child would be permanently committed, and then we would pursue adoption. Those decisions, both foster care and adoption, occur in the juvenile court, so there are lots of people that have impact on those decisions, so they're not things that are made in isolation decisions. We also work closely with teens when they are looking to emancipate, leave our system. We really try to keep those kids with us as long as possible so we can have a successful transition for them into adulthood. A little bit about the numbers. Last year, we touch really 1 in 12 children in this community. So you think about your own community, we're touching 1 in 12. We worked with over 15,000 children last year as a result of abuse and neglect. That's about 7,000 families. Our 241 Kids line, we receive over 65,000 calls a year to that line. We have staff that are there at all times of the day, weekends and nights, answering calls, trying to help figure out if the call that's coming in is really a result of abuse or neglect, or is it something that we can refer to another provider. Of those 65,000 calls, over 6,500 actually generate a report, which gave us the authority to actually go into a home and do an investigation. A little bit about what the levy does. It supports a lot of different systems within our community. When we go to the next slide. And you heard this already. We are actually, this is a renewal. So we haven't had an increase since 1996. So it's flat. It's 2.77 mills. One thing that I would tell you that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, even though our levy's been flat, the needs within our community have grown, as well as the number of children that we're serving. It would cost a home, it's a 2.77 mil, it will cost a homeowner of a $100,000 home approximately $56 a year. The levy generates roughly $40 million a year, and we actually use that money to match federal dollars and state dollars, dollar for dollar. So although we're bringing in about $40 million, we're also matching that with another $40 million. So actually the child welfare system that you know costs us about $89 million a year to run. 80 of that comes from the levy. A sad piece of information is that the state of Ohio ranks the worst in the nation as it relates to child welfare. We receive only 3% of our funding from the state. So we're very dependent upon the local levy to support the child welfare system that we have in Hamilton County. The things that we're seeing in the community, 70%, I was a worker many, many years ago. The cases were complex, but certainly not as complex as they are today. 70% of the cases that our staff are working with have a combination of substance abuse, mental health, and violence. So there's lots of things going on in our home, lots of trauma within our families, lots of trauma within the community. Heroin, as you read in the papers, we're challenged very much with heroin. Right now, statewide, 70% of the infants are in foster care because of a heroin addiction of a parent. So if you can think about those numbers. We've seen an increase since 2010, statewide, 19% increase in children coming into care, and 50% of what we are saying, these are of all kids, is related to heroin. And you've heard about the local thing, 177 Hamilton County heroin deaths last year in 2014. What are the needs? We have great needs in our community with the families that we're working with. Certainly parenting classes, substance abuse, mental health, trauma. There's so much trauma going on with our families. If you can imagine, and we see children that are actually, some kids have reported actually helping their parents shoot up with heroin because they were trying to keep their parents and they want to stay home with them. Families, by the time we receive the call, lots of things have been going on in the home, lots of issues of potential neglect or abuse. And so what does that mean? It means that our kids have lots of issues that we're trying to deal with. So you're sometimes looking at generations of trauma. We need to do a lot more in-home services. We're really trying to do more in-home, in the community services, so families can be reached while they're in their community versus having the family come to us. We've been fortunate enough to upgrade with some technology. If you remember a few years ago, we were able to, all of our caseworkers were able to have iPads, so when they're going out in their community, they're getting quick information, they're accessing who all's in the home, finding out what the safety concerns are, and hopefully that's helping us make better decisions as it relates to safety. You've heard it, we've struggled with our turnover rate. It was a big topic of conversation, but I always like to remind people this is something that's really challenging the child welfare system across the country. All of us are struggling with really what I would say are many unfunded or underfunded mandates by the federal government. Currently, last year we had a tough year, was at 47%. We're about 20% now, but if you show up in these slides, you'll see other jurisdictions. Northern Kentucky, our partners right now, they're struggling with 50%. A lot of people say, why is that? Well, our staff, the next slide, Brian. Work very long hours. It's difficult work. They themselves are having trauma. One thing we're learning now more and more is oftentimes a social worker in child welfare is the same as a police officer or a firefighter because they're on the ground. They're seeing so much trauma. Our workers' starting salary is about $18.17 an hour. If you can imagine, that's not a lot of money when you're talking about really high-risk cases. There's also a lot of scrutiny by the public and media. These staff really do try to do the best that they can with the information they have, and sadly when something happens, the staff feel obviously terribly traumatized by any things that happen in homes. Some of the challenges going forward, well, many of you will remember several years ago when we lost about 50% of our funding. We laid off half of our staff, and what did that mean is that at the same time our caseloads rose, so our staff continued to be stretched very thin. We'll never see the increase in our staffing levels that we had in 2008. We know that managed care is coming to our foster children. That's going to be taking in effect starting in January of 2017 for medical, and then behavioral health will be the year after. And we're anticipating a local shift about $10 million. So as that transition happens, we're saying that locally that's going to cost us about $10 million. The tangible personal property tax will be phased out. That's going to add an additional $6.2 million to our costs annually. We've been very fortunate to be part of a demonstration grant, the Protect Ohio. There's discussion at the federal level that will be phased out in 2019. And again, that's a potential $10 million hit. So if you think about what we're looking at with our levy dollars, are getting smaller and smaller and smaller with all these things happening. And I mentioned this before, but I want to keep stressing it. Today, we have 321 more children in foster care than we did a year ago, and we attribute that to the drugs and particularly heroin that's in our community. You've heard this term used a couple of times tonight, underfunded or unfunded mandates. Many of the things that we do are mandated by law, and many of them are underfunded. To give you an example, although it's not in child welfare, adult protective services is another thing that we do in the job and family services. It costs, the state gives us $30 million, but it cost us about $662 million. There's a new law coming through about keeping foster children within the same district. It's a great rule, it's a great law, but the problem is there's no funding associated with that. So we anticipate that's going to cost us about $650,000 a year on additional to what we already have. If you look at our other counterparts across the state, I mentioned Hamilton County spends about $87 million for our child welfare system. Our friends up in Cuyahoga spend $133 million, and our colleagues in Franklin spend $193 million. So their levy's much larger, and they're able to, of course, have more dollars to help meet the needs of the population that they're serving, but our communities are very similar. And last time we ran, we passed with 72%. So as Jack said, we keep going down the ballot because we're at 53, and we definitely need your support. So thank you.
We are now opening the floor to questions from the audience.
Around 78 million. Do you think you're going to be able to hire more caseworkers and lower their caseload?
So with that money was the fund balance, and we have factored in to use those dollars to help us get through the next levy cycle of 5 years because the levy's flat. So we aren't going to really be able to hire a lot more staff. We really need to use the fund balance as well as this new levy to help us manage the next 5 years. But we are continuing to hire and fill all of our vacancies. We've added a few positions, but certainly will never be to the same levels that we were in '08.
Yes, thank you. If I understood from your presentation, the need and the scope of your work is greatly increasing and expanding. So if you would explain why the decision was made for a renewal that would be flat, no increase. That's the first question. The second question is, in the paper that was handed out today, it says that if the levy funding is not available, you'll just get the money from the county general fund. So you're even Steven then.
So the Board of County Commissioners determines whether there's a levy on the ballot and to what amount. So the county commissioners, through a tax levy review committee, hired a consultant, and they made a recommendation to the commission. The commission is the body that decides really whether we have a levy or not for child welfare and the amount of it. So that was a decision that was made by that governing body. The services are mandated, and that's true. If we do not have a levy, it would rely on the general fund. The question would be if the general fund locally has the dollars needed to be able to support the system that we have in place right now. The general fund dollars.
Yes, but what was the decision that, the information that the commissioners based their decision on to keep it flat?
From the report that the tax levy review committee supplied to them. There was public hearings, and then they made that decision. And they factored in that we had a fund balance, and they wanted to make sure that those dollars were used appropriately within the levy cycle.
Mara, what was the recommendation level from the review committee before the county commissioners cut it down?
They actually went for a flat.
Oh, I thought it was higher.
There was discussion about it being higher, but I think ultimately the tax levy review committee went flat.
I actually was at that meeting. They basically said, we think that they deserve more money. They've been good stewards of the public dollars, but we just aren't going to increase the tax burden on the people of Hamilton County. That's what they said.
You might want to point out the website where all the reports are given.
Yes, the reports are at the county website for the tax levy review committee. If you go onto the Board of County Commissioner website, and you can access that tax levy review document as well as their report.
It's an excellent report. It talks about all the good things you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I'll just talk. The tax levy review committee also said, like in 2 years, they're going to review
Yes, the part of the,
If they-
pardon?
What can they do if they review it for 5 years?
So we could potentially come back to voters if we're, if those increases continue with the amount of children coming into care and the cost of care and all of these things that are happening, we would potentially have to come back to the voters. But, I mean, that would be, the Board of County Commissioners would make that decision based on our spending and based on how many families we're touching.
We have time for one more question.
Is there any effort being made to encourage the state to contribute more funding dollars?
I certainly would encourage that.
But is there any action committee or anything that's going on to?
Not that I'm aware of, but I've been trying to say, particularly when I'm given the platform, I try to educate people around that, because I do think that's something that the state should look at in terms of how they fund child welfare. I mean, we are the last in the nation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ware. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area, I would like to take this opportunity to express the League's appreciation to all presenters for giving their valuable time and expertise. I would also like to thank each one of you for coming out tonight and attending this forum in order to become better informed on the issues. A special thanks goes out to our League of Women Voters volunteers who help make all our events and great work possible. For more information about the November election, League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area and upcoming events, visit our website at leagueofwomenvoterscincinnati.org. Also check out the League's Vote 411 website online for election information. Who and what of election, our annual voter guide that so many voters look forward to each year will be available in print version and online on October 11th. It is distributed as an insert in Cincinnati City Beat newspaper and also by various community organizations. If you support the League's work and would like to join or donate, more information is available here tonight or online. If you did not get a chance to do so on your way in, please visit our information table on the way out. If anyone needs to register to vote, please see a League member before leaving. Deadline to register or change name and address and be eligible to vote in the November 8 election is October 11th, 1 week from today. At this time, the issues forum is concluded. Again, I would like to thank our presenters, our League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area volunteers, and all those in attendance. Thank you and good night.